Bang. And it's up there. Okay.
Thanks. So we'll do call and response. Narayanam namaskritya Narayanam namaskritya Naram chaiva narottamam Naram chaiva narottamam Devim sarasvatim vyasam Devim sarasvatim vyasam Tato jayam pudirayat Tato jayam pudirayat. And then I'll sing once and then we'll sing 3 times together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 3 times. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Akandamandalakaram yena vyaptam characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Apavitra Pavitro Va Sarvavasta Gatopi Va Yasmaret Pundarikaksham Sa Bhayabhyantara Shuchi Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Jessica. That was very beautiful. Next time, if you want, you can, go on a little bit longer if you want. 3-4 minutes, or if you care to, if that works for you. I would love that. I'm sure everybody would. Okay, just give me one tiny second. I'll be right back. I'm sorry, I had to run out to the car. It'd be about 5 seconds. Jessica, do you want to I just run to the car, just going to get something. If you like, we could just do another Om Namo Bhagavata, a few Om Namo Bhagavates. It's up to you.
Okay, sure. Yeah. On the spot, it's a little hard. Okay. Well, we'll just continue then with the same. I didn't prepare anything else yet. Okay. So we can actually, we can go call and response then if it's going to be a couple of minutes, yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate It's a bit, I'm just imagining all of you singing back to me. It's a little lonely in this room without you all singing with me. Maybe,
You can all unmute if you like.
what's that?
You can all try and unmute if you like.
It doesn't work out that well. I've tried it before. It works. It's very garbled, and everyone's coming in at different times, so
You,
it's not
it's
so beautiful.
unmute.
Yeah. Let's
Well,
see.
it's beautiful to hear you.
Oh, thank you. I wish I was kind of ready to do something else as well, but we could just do a few more like this. Oh, perfect. Perfect timing.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna mute everybody only so that you don't get embarrassed when you yell at your husband with your speaker on or whatever. Okay, my friends, so we just go straight to it. You got a chat there, Jessica. Check out compliments coming in through the chats. They're all yours. Okay, so we had the first question. He asked the assembled sages, "What is the dharma?" This is Parikshit Maharaj. What is the dharma of someone at the moment of death? All other dharmas, dharma is normally it's an unusual use of the word dharma because dharma is normally something that is associated with prakriti, but I suppose death is prakriti, so maybe that works. But dharma, conventionally the dharma shastras are about, duties in civic and social duties. You could also talk about the dharma of the body, I suppose. I don't think Ayurveda uses it, but here it's being used of the dharma. What is the dharma of the mind? Yeah, the mind is prakriti. So what is the dharma of the mind at the moment of death, where all other dharmas are useless? They have been what they have been. We did what we did. We lived our lives in the way we lived them, dharmically, adharmically, semi-dharmically, or whatever the case may be. But now death is there, imminent, and Parikshit knows precisely the moment, which is if you think about it, the greatest blessing you could imagine. If you really knew you were going to die at that moment, you at least would have. I mean, maybe most people would freak out, but yogis would be just consider that such a blessing. And Parikshit does exactly what a real Paramahamsa yogi would do. He fasts. He doesn't want anything to interfere. He doesn't want the mind to be distracted. Because as we know from the Gita, yam yam vapi smaram bhavam, tyajate ante kalevaram, tam tamevi taro jana, sadatad bhava bhavita. So whatever we think of at the moment of death, that's going to be our next birth. Of course, in conjunction with karma and so forth. So, and that thing, and whatever comes to the mind at the moment to death is likely to be the thing we have the biggest attachment to in life. And when we actually leave, we actually realize we're leaving. And by the way, you don't necessarily realize you're dying. I have a friend who's doing research now on post-mortem, the post-mortem immediately after death. And she's looking through the Sanskrit literature, but she's also looking at sort of medium literature coming out of the Western tradition. But she's herself is grounded in the Indian tradition. So I've encouraged her to, really, the Garuda Purāṇa, for example, has 3 or 4 chapters about it, about the immediately you leave the body and the disembodied soul and so on and so forth. But anyway, so that's an interesting thing, I feel. So Parikshit then is the first question to the sages. What is the dharma then at that moment? What the dharma of the mind? Because dharma it doesn't pertain to the Atman. The Atman has no dharma. It's just pure consciousness. So dharma pertains to your prakritic, either the body, the dharma of the mind, your social dharma, civic dharmas, and so on and so forth. Shuka wanders in to the assembly. He's recognized instantly by his Brahma Tejas, even though all of these great saints have they've all had a Svarupa Vastanam. They've all had an experience of their Atman, and many of them are great bhaktas. Perhaps some of them even had darshan of Sri Bhagavan in one of his many forms. So, so he wanders in, is immediately recognized. by its characteristics. It's interesting. The Bhagavatam doesn't actually specify what those characteristics are. What are the characteristics that great sage recognize they're all Paramahamsas, they're all Jivan Muktas. So what is it about Shuka that they recognize that they instantly recognize that he's way beyond whatever state they've attained? Because you would think, well, once you've attained the Atman, if you're a Jnani, once you've attained the Atman, that's the end of the line. And if you're a Bhakta, once you've had a darshan of Krishna, then where do you go from there? So what is it? What were these characteristics? Are not mentioned. But, that's the sort of question that you look in the commentaries. And that's how the commentarial tradition works. You have the primary text. It's called the primary source, the primary text. And then, questions are raised, just like I raised a question, where you can imagine over the centuries, the Bhagavatas that are sharing the Bhagavat Purāṇa with their moment in time with students and disciples. Someone will put up his hand, or they wouldn't do that in ancient India, but they would say, Guruji, yeah, what are these characteristics? And then then the commentators would explain things in the text that perhaps their disciples have raised or their own minds have raised, questions like that. And the commentators then would elaborate on it, and they wouldn't just speculate. They wouldn't just give their own a point of view. They would draw on the scriptures. My guru was like that. He was just, all he did, his whole world was just Shastra. He was a Shastri. And you asked him a question and he would just, it was like having a conversation with scripture. You ask him a question and he would just respond with a verse. So he was that kind of that kind of a Shastri, means someone learned in Shastra, a great devotee, but he happened to be a Brahmana. And a Shastri is the Brahmins. They're the ones that study the Shastra and teach the Shastra, meaning the Sanskrit text. It would just be Sanskrit. So these commentaries would deal with that kind of a question. What were these characteristics? We know from the story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 15th century, probably the greatest bhakta ever. I'm not saying that. It's been sort of widely recognized. His hair would stand on end. Tears would just shoot out of his eyes like projectiles. His limbs would contract and extend and contract. Kind of grotesque. They would fit well in Halloween, perhaps, but they could be seen as grotesque physiological symptoms because his bhav, his ecstatic states of love, prem, the material body wasn't made to accommodate that. Material body and the material mind are meant to accommodate, sensual input and samskaric creative thinking, and it just blows the system. So perhaps something like that. But that would be something to look into in the commentators for. So Shuka is now nicely seated, and now he asks us one question to the sages before Shuka arrives. What is the dharma of the person in the moment of death? And now Shuka is there, and he says, therefore I ask of you, the most eminent of gurus among yogis. So he's not flattering Shuka here, because all of the assembled sages recognized him. It was they that sort of recognized him. So the questions are, what is the means to perfection? Shouldn't that be what are the means to perfection? Typo. What are the means to perfection? What should be done at every moment by a person in this world about to die? And clearly that means us. How many people are informed of the exact moment of death? I don't know if that's a yogic siddhi. It's not in the Patanjali and third chapter. You hear stories of yogis who know that the moment of their death, but it's not a siddhi that's mentioned in the Yoga Sutra third chapter. In the Yoga Sutra third chapter, one of the siddhis is ability to know your past lives, but there's nothing there about knowing the moment of your death. But in principle, there's no reason why that couldn't be known, because when you're born, Patanjali says, your jati ayu bhoga, right, is fixed. So your ayu is fixed. Your ayu meaning how many breaths you're going to take in that form. I don't see why there wouldn't in principle be some method, be it astrological, or be it, the yogis can go into their chitta and they have access to their chittas. That's how they know all their past lives. So if they know all their past lives, one can infer they might have the ability to see the cluster of samskaras that are activated for this life. And they might have a way of quantifying that and translating it into the moment of death. I mean, it's not that possibility does not conflict with Sankhya metaphysics or yoga psychology. But anyway, for most of us, we don't have that knowledge. So what is to be done at every moment, meaning every moment for us, because we don't have that privilege. And what should be heard? Meaning, what samskaras should we allow into our minds? He's not eating, right? He's not walking around looking at things. So pretty much he's not using his senses, not in a Patanjali and Pratyahara sort of way. He's not closed them all down. He's a bhakta, right? He's sitting there with the assemblies, but it's really hearing that's the primary one. He wants to hear from the sages. So the primary sense that he's interested in now is hearing. And of course, from the five senses, actually hearing is prioritized. Sacred sound, even more than darshana, even more than seeing. So so that's an interesting point. So what should be heard? He's not saying what should be seen, what should be smelled, but what should be heard? Because that's how knowledge is transmitted. That's how Bhagavan manifests in the form of sound. So hearing is the preeminent of the senses in Indian tradition. What should be heard? What mantra should be chanted? And we looked at this, jap yam. Okay, we looked at this. Remember, japa is, and jap yam, those of you doing Sanskrit, is a gerundive. There's three forms of gerundive, the ya form. Okay? I'm not going to call anybody's name out, Alice, because then they could get in trouble afterwards. But that's a gerundive. Okay? So, jap yam. What should be chanted? What action should be performed by men, O Master, and women? Come on, let's get something. We need to, if I were now when I write, I should have been more attentive here. I'm conflicted on this, because you can't, if you start going down the road of gender equalizing everything, you're actually adjusting the text. And if you adjust the text in one instance, then what's to stop somebody adjusting in another instance? And then another one, and somebody saying, well, why be vegetarian? Let's eat meat and take out all the meat reference. Where do you end up with that? So I'm of the opinion you have to strictly follow, but certain things you can tweak a little bit. You could say people instead of men, even though the actual Sanskrit is the male noun. But that much I would be comfortable doing were I to do this again, and certainly in my writing now. People. What's wrong with saying people? Because clearly that's the intention. Bhakti is not in any way gender exclusive. The Vedic rituals are. Vedic ritualism is. In the Vedic ritual, the wife has to be at the sacrifice, but she sits next to the husband in a totally supporting passive role. So Vedic ritualism is gender exclusive and caste exclusive, but not bhakti. Sweeps all that away. In fact, the greatest bhaktas in the Bhagavatam are all women. The gopis are the greatest of all bhaktas ever in existence. And so many stories of the women that, the top two spots in love of God are female. The gopis and Yashoda. It's called Madhurya Bhav, the love of the lover and the love of the parent, Madhurya, Vatsalya. The top two spots in terms of intensity, the highest possible intensity of love of God, because there's different flavors and forms, are female. So Bhakti does away with all of that. So what mantra should be chanted? What action should be performed by men, O Master, right? Normally we act to fulfill desires or perform social duties, but we're going to die now. So what action should be performed then? What should be remembered, meaning what should we fix our mind on? And what should be worshipped? And also, please tell me what should be avoided. So these are 7, 8 questions plus the one previously. And we mentioned, I think, about this. We explained this verse. Indeed, O Brahman, it is known that your honor never lingers in the homes of those attached to their households for more than even the brief time taken to milk a cow. Did we discuss this? Do you remember? Well, basically, the idea is that great beings, once you've attained these ultimate states, you have no reason to do anything. So some just sit in the cave and meditate and just avoid the world and just go back into their meditative states. And, when their karma pushes them out for food or nourishment, they come, but basically they're isolationists. And others, since there's no reason, the Bhagavatam, the Gita says, there's no reason to act, but there's also no reason not to act. So act in the welfare of others. So others wander around. And so the idea is these saints, they go to the householder, they knock on the door and they beg some milk. They don't actually want the milk, but they're giving the householder an opportunity to ask questions about ultimate truths. If the householder doesn't take advantage, the time it takes to milk a cow, they go. But if the householder, somehow or other, the samskaras in the householder's mind recognize this is a rare occasion, a special being, invites the saint in, and honors him and asks questions, then they'll stay. As long as there's discussion of Krishna and Bhagavan and the Atman, they'll stay. So that's the idea of this verse here. Your honor never lingers in the homes of those attached to their households. My friends, that's you and me. We're attached to our households. But they don't linger in households like ours for more than even the brief time taken to milk a cow. And then the subtext is, unless, of course, the householder takes advantage of, and by asking ultimate questions about the ultimate truths of life. So addressed in question in this way, with those sincere words, the great Shuka, he's the son of Vyas, remember the story, and knower of Dharma, responded to the king. And I think that's where we left off. So Shuka says, this question of yours posed for the welfare of people. So I guess the idea with that is Parikshit, this is a public event. This is the emperor of the known world. So, if it had been nowadays, you'd have had CNN, the BBC, and every news channel in the world there filming this. So this was a major, massive, the grandson of Arjuna, grandnephew of Krishna. It doesn't get bigger than that. Everyone else had died. He was I'm talking about, family credentials. Krishna was his uncle, a granduncle. So therefore, Shuka's saying, well, you're asking for the welfare of everybody, because then the Bhagavatam gets recorded and it gets handed down. And here we are in the 21st century, all over the world, even our little tiny Sangha, benefiting from it. So that's Shuka saying, you're asking this for the benefit of the world. And it seems true to me, because here we are anyway, right? It's the welfare of people. It's excellent, O king. It is appreciated by those who know the Atman. They already know the Atman. And therefore, one who knows the Atman is not going to be interested in anything else. Once you've known the Atman, even Patanjali says, Pada Vairagyam, right in the beginning. Right? What's Nirodha? It's Abhyasa Vairagya. And what's Vairagya? And there's the lower Vairagya and the Param. The Pada Vairagya is Guna Vaitrishna. Man, no interest in anything made of the Gunas. So therefore, but they're interested in the Atman, they're interested in conversations about the Atman, because the Atman has nothing to do with the Gunas. So it is appreciated by those who know the Atman. And from everything that is useful for people to hear, things are useful for us to hear, right? We need to know what the weather's going to be, if there's going to be a hurricane. So many things might be useful to hear. But it is the most worthwhile topic, because everything else is connected with Prakriti and aspects of Prakriti, and everything else is temporary. It's dealing with temporary subject matters that is not ultimate. But this is ultimate. It's the most worthwhile, but it's eternally ultimate. For those people who have not seen the truth of the Atman, that's you and I, or I'm assuming, certainly me, and are attached to their homes and households, there are thousands of things that seem worth hearing, O king. Right? We chatter away about so many things. We watch the news, we read the newspapers, where, there's even, even frivolous things like the lives of, Bollywood and Hollywood stars. So this seems to be thousands of things that seem to be important to us. But that's because, why? How does he framing it? We have not seen the truth of the Atman. And therefore we're interested in all these other things. This is interesting. The prime of life is carried away by sexual intercourse and sleep during the night, O king, and through striving for wealth and maintaining one's family during the day. Right, he's going to narrow it down. Okay, so let's say in the Vedic system, sexual intercourse, right, the idealized ashrama system, first 25 years, brahmachari celibate, then 25 to 50, right? He's talking about the prime of life, right? So that will be the prime. So that's 25 to 50. So that's the stage in the caste system, in the ashrama system, where people get married. So he's saying the prime of life is carried away, right? The body is strong and attractive still. And so it's carried away by sexual intercourse, right? And then sleep during the night. So that's a third of one's time gone. Okay, and then through striving for wealth and maintaining one's family during the day. So depending on your occupation, a businessman like a Vaishya, that would be one of the castes, that's wealth. But, whether you're Brahmin or Kshatriya or a Sudra, you would still be a family man. So you're maintaining the family according to whatever your Varna is. So that's half the life gone right there. Obsessed with one's body, right? We're always worried about our health and and aging and freaking out when we see white hairs, and so obsessed with the bodies, with children and wife, etc., which are like illusory soldiers. They can be snatched away at any moment. They're illusory. All of these things we cling to are gone. It can be gone at any moment. I'm sure we've all had tragic deaths in our immediate family. So it just happens, and we ourselves are subject. So they're illusory. One does not perceive their demise. We don't see that all of these things that we cling to, our relationships, our partners, our spouses, our children, we don't see that they're temporary. They're bound to end. They're bound to end in demise. They're bound to be taken away. So we don't perceive, even while actually perceiving it. We see it. We see our kids. They go to college, and and then they don't email, or whatever it might be. Right? All of these relationships are temporary. Especially in the West, our partners could just get up one morning and just say, "Oh, I don't love you anymore," and that's it. Gone, finished. You have all that time and energy invested in the relationship shattered. That's what the verse is saying. And it's true. We've all experienced this. Therefore, O son of Bharata, one desiring freedom from fear, right? Fear that we'll lose our partners, that we'll lose our children, we'll lose our own bodies, our youth, our beauty, fear of death, all of these fears. What should we do? We should hear about. This is the Bhagavatam's answer to Parikshit's questions, and the rest, the 18,000 verses are going to expand on this. Hear about, that's what we're doing, especially in Book 10. Glorify and remember Hari. One of the questions was, what should you remember? Remember Hari, he's Bhagavan, Ishwara, the soul of everything, right? Ishwara is a term that's used in philosophical literature. So Ishwara is a term you find in Yoga Sutra, Ishwara is a term you find in Vedanta for personal Brahman, and Ishwara is even the term that the atheists use. They argue against Ishwara. When the Buddhists and Jains say, we don't accept Ishwara, and they give their reasons for that, they use the term Ishwara. Bhagavan already, you would use the term Bhagavan. Ishwara just simply means the creator of the universe, or the sustainer of the universe, or the controller of the universe. Once you accept that there is a God, then in the Indian tradition, pretty much all devotional traditions accept that Ishwara manifests in the world. And when the Ishwara manifests in the world, he manifests in a form. So it could be the form of Shiva, beautiful form of Shiva, form of Krishna, form of Narayana, form of Devi, Durga. All of them are very specific forms. Different, maybe different number of arms for the goddess, depending on what she's up to in a particular form. So this is the form, and then the forms have qualities. For example, when we started, I pointed to Tulsi. Well, Krishna always takes Tulsi. When you offer food to Krishna, you put a Tulsi leaf on it, but not to Durga, not to Shiva. This is the Tulsi beads of the Vaishnava. The Shaiva will wear Rudraksha. So these are all all of these differences because these forms of Bhagavan, they will have qualities and personalities and engage in different kinds of activities. And how do you become a bhakta? Well, you fall in love with a set of them, same as how you fall in love in the mundane world. Except you don't fall in love, you fall into illusion. But apart from that tiny little detail, in principle, right, in the daydream, in the fantasy of love, you fall in love with a form and the qualities of your beloved and the activities. So it's nama, rupa, guna, lila. So the nama is the name. So now, when you're on that level, that Ishwara is manifesting we has a particular nama, Shiva, Krishna, Vishnu, that's the name. A particular rupa, Krishna is blue and he's typically tribangi, he has three bends, three curves in his body. If you look at the deities of Krishna, you see ding, ding, ding. And he always has a flute. That's how you know it's Krishna and nobody else. Nobody else. And he has a peacock feather, nobody else. And Shiva has his sanket, his signs, and nobody else has. The snakes or whatever it might be. Ganga bouncing on his head. Only Shiva, and only Shiva receives the Ganga. It comes from Vishnu, pokes his toe through the covering of the universe, and the spiritual waters outside come gushing in, and they would destroy the power would destroy the earth. So only Shiva can bear that force. So these are the qualities. So nama, guna, nama, rupa is the form. Nama, rupa, Kartikeya has a peacock feather. Okay, I didn't know that, so I'll have to check that. Is that true, Kartikeya? So I stand corrected. Thank you. But I mean, of course, the peacock feather is associated with Vrindavan, the place where there's full of peacocks. Yeah, well, Kartikeya, doesn't he ride a peacock? I think Kartikeya's vehicle is a peacock. But does he have a peacock in his turban? That's we could check up on that. Okay, but thank you for that comment in the chat there. So you have nama, rupa, guna, and then lila activities. So Shiva, and Parvati, they have their leelas, and so these, when Ishvara manifests with a nama and in a rupa and with gunas and performs leelas, we then might call Ishvara Bhagavan. So Bhagavan means one, right? Sanskritists. Van means possessor of. So Van means possessor of. So Bhagavan means possessor of bhagas, and bhagas means qualities. So each of these forms has distinctive qualities. So you wouldn't use the term Bhagavan if you're just engaging in a debate with an atheist. But first you have to establish there's a God in the first place, and then you can talk about whether the nama, rupa, guna, leelas of God. So if you're engaging in philosophical discussion, you use the term Ishwara, and that's the term used in philosophy. Between, let's say, the Nyaya school that are Ishwaravadins, they accept Ishwara, and the Buddhists that don't. So when you're having those kinds of debates, you use the term Ishwara. Why would you use the term, right? It's like saying, first you have to establish that there is a position of President of the United States, and then you can talk about any particular occupant of that position. It doesn't make sense talking about the occupant of president if you don't accept there's a presidency in the first place. So that's something like that. So that's Bhagavan. Okay, that's the difference between the term Bhagavan. Typically, these are not hard and fast rules, but generally speaking, in the meaning of the words, Ishvara means Ish, power. So Ishvara means the one who has most power. And what's the most powerful thing you can do is create a universe. So typically, when we're talking about the creator of the universe, then we would use the term Ishwara. But when we talk about Ishwara actually manifesting, what does it mean to manifest? It means to manifest a form, a rupa, and qualities, a guna, and engage in activities, lila, and have a name, nama. So nama, rupa, guna, lila. Okay? Are the aspects that would be associated with the term Bhagavan. So, okay. And we'll keep going. Just me 1 second. I was looking for somebody. Now, so he's Bhagavan Ishvara. So it's useful to, we can unpack these verses. I mean, we could spend a long time on each verse. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So you're welcome to join me. Once I retire, we can read, more than what we can read every week or several times a week. I mean, this is what, I'm going to be like Parikshit at the end of life. You retire. What do you do when you retire? What's the only useful thing to do when you retire? It's to fix the mind of Bhagavan. So this is a beautiful way of doing that, reading the Bhagavatam. So I'm not going to rush through this, and you can stay with it or not, but I plan to be doing this until I croak. Okay? So I'll be on the deathbed like this. And Parikshit, Shuka. And just hang in there. And all right. So, right now, indeed, the perfection of life for a person, right? Whether through the paths of Sankhya or Yoga, through the performance of duty, which is dharma, or through jnana or karma yoga, what's the ultimate grand finale or the highest peak of any of those systems is to remember Narayana at the end of life. Narayana, the ayana, the resting, the abode of all naras, of all people. This is the goal of life. At the end of life, to remember Narayana. And my friends, don't think you're going to magically remember Narayana at the moment of death if you haven't practiced in life. I mean, there's always exceptions to everything. This might be some freak chance that whatever, but if we shouldn't imagine that we don't need to practice and okay, when I'm on my deathbed I'll remember. No, you won't. You'll be if you clung onto all of your if we cling onto our attachments and our nonsense and our illusions during life, what's what we're going to be doing at the moment of death, even more severely, because we're freaking out because we're leaving it. You think we're going to be able to sever that attachment at death if we haven't during life? Of course not. So therefore, to remember Narayana at the end of life, one has to practice during life. And that's that's the goal of life. Usually, O king, sages who have desisted from mundane ritualistic rules and regulations, okay? Now, here's the mundane rules, ritualistic rules and regulations are kind of like the Vedic sacrifice. The Vedic sacrifice is very materialistic. And you're offering sacrifices. You read the Rig Veda. The Penguin has a, Wendy Doniger translated, bits of it. It's all just hymns to God, asking for stuff. It's what I used to call gimme, gimme religion. Gimme, gimme, right? It's business. You throw things in the sacrifice and then you request this, that, and the other in return. So what is the equivalent of that in our day and age? Because we shouldn't be thinking that's back then and not now. No, that mindset is exactly the same mindset. If I grew up a Catholic. If you go into a Catholic church and light a candle in front of a saint and ask, and Catholics, their patron saints are like the Devas. There's a patron saint for everything. So you go into a church and light a candle and, to whatever, the patron saint of traveling before or whatever it might be, Padre Pio, and you ask for this, that, and the other. That's exactly the mindset of the Vedic ritualist. So the rituals are different, but the mindset's the same. It's nothing to do with spirituality, nothing to do with the Atman and Bhagavan and love of God. It's simply trying to bribe higher powers with your little candle or your little donation in the box. You're trying to bribe, or at least cajole. Let's be a little less harsh. You're trying to cajole the patron saints to give you boons. And Catholics are serious about this, as every society known to anthropology has something like this. So that is what the verse is talking about. Should be relinquished. That kind of a mindset. It's nothing to do with spirituality at all. It's just high-level business, transaction. I mean, it's pious and it's purifying, but it's nothing to do with yoga. So those who have desisted from mundane ritualistic rules and regulations, fasting to whatever, to certain times of the year to get some kind of result, wives fast for their husbands, all of this sort of thing. Is simply mundane, pious, and probably sattva conducive, but nothing to do with yoga. So the sages who have desisted from this are situated in the state beyond the gunas. They've attained Brahman. When you're in that state, you relish the qualities and stories of Hari. This verse cannot be accommodated in Advaita Vedanta. In Advaita Vedanta, when you've reached Brahman, everything is illusory, including the stories of Hari. Hari is illusory in Advaita Vedanta. Whereas in Vaishnavism, the world isn't illusory. And impersonal Brahman is not the highest. The Atman is not the highest truth. There is a truth beyond that, an eternal individual truth called Bhagavan, Ishwara. So this verse specifically cannot be accommodated in an Advaita type of philosophical framework. So the Bhagavatam is a Vaishnava text, right? Because once you're situated in the state beyond the gunas, who have attained Brahman in traditions like even Sankhya and Advaita Vedanta, that's it. You don't do. What are you doing Bhakti for? Bhakti is just a process. It's not the goal. But in Vaishnavism, it's the process and the goal. And what's the goal? You spend all eternity engaging in a loving relationship with Bhagavan, and that means what is that? What is love? You relish the qualities and stories of Hari. Even in the mundane world, when you think you're in love, right, for 6 months, whatever, all you can do is think about your beloved and talk about your beloved. Or if you're a young mother, or you go down the park with your baby, and what do? You talk with the other mothers. All you do is talk about your child, and we did this, and she did that, and so forth. So something like that. The bhaktas have that. Their mind is constantly absorbed. And the theologians actually use the mother and the baby as the closest thing in our realm. The closest thing in our sphere of experience in terms of actual love is that of the mother of the child. So they relish the qualities and stories of Hari. The Bhagavat Purāṇa, this Bhagavat Purāṇa is non-different from Brahman. Just like mantra is non-different from Brahman. Just throw a log in the fire here. It's fire time. Oh, that's going to go out. Okay, new one. All right, I'll let it go out. It won't take too much time. So therefore, when we talk about fixing the mind on God, how do you do that? What does it mean? God isn't some abstract principle, some kind of a vague sense of something higher. Nothing wrong with that. That's a good start. But the Puranic tradition is much more specific than that. Fixing the mind on God means you fix your mind, and those 4 things. Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila. You fix your mind on the name. You can have the name running through your mind all day, even while you're doing other chores. Once you've practiced japa for many years, that mantra is kind of like background music in your mind that you might not always be fully focused on because you're doing your activities, but you can check in on any time. So that's one way of thinking of God, or having the mind fixed on God, is having the mantra there. Then the Bhagavatam is another way, absorbing the mind in the Bhagavatam. So what we're doing now is God consciousness, where our minds are absorbed in God consciousness, because where our minds are absorbed in this text. That's why it's called the Bhagavata Purāṇa. It's Bhagavata is Bhagavan. It's non-different from Brahman. It's not a representative of Brahman. It's not a channel through which we get to Brahman. It is Brahman, just like mantra is Brahman. So he says, I learned it from my father Vyasa at the end of Dvapara Yuga, the third world age. So it's not that the Bhagavatam that we have now, it's not a historical construct according to the text. It's not it's apurusheya. It's not written by any human. It's transmitted by humans. It might be put down in writing by humans, Vyas specifically. Actually, back then it was all oral, so it probably wasn't put into writing until, I don't know, the early centuries of the Common Era. So it might become fossilized, but it is considered eternal because Bhagavan is eternal. And Krishna is eternal, and his leelas are eternal. So the Bhagavatam, it does have historical stuff in it. It talks about kings, it talks about lineages, it talks about historical events. But the ultimate essence of the Bhagavatam, which is transmitting information about Krishna and other avatars, that's eternal, specifically Krishna, because some of the avatars are historical manifestations. They manifest in history, but they may not have eternal transcendent forms. But some of the forms of Bhagavan are eternal. They're beyond Prakriti, and they manifest in Prakriti, but they like Krishna's form is eternally exists in his own dimension of Goloka, the kingdom of God, which is everything's made of pure, nothing's material, no matter, no time, no cause and effect. Everything is pure condensed consciousness. But there's forms. And that's where bhaktas want to go. They want to go to these realms and they receive a spiritual form, right? The Atman leaves, just like any moksha. The Atman leaves the body. Well, everybody leaves the body at death, but you also, moksha means you cast aside the subtle body, which you've had since infinite births, the same subtle body, the linga, the sharira, the shukshma sharira, the antakarna, you leave that. Now what happens? You go to these spiritual realms, whichever form of Bhagavan has captured your heart, and you receive a spiritual form. And that's specially designed to allow you to engage in loving relationship with God. Just like these material forms are specially designed for us to receive our karma, the fruits of our activities. So I have bad eyesight because of some karmic reason, and we all have whatever issues and assets and defects, all karma. But the spiritual forms are designed to accommodate the type of love we wish to share with Bhagavan. And Bhagavan takes the form appropriate to that. So you have eternal relationship with Bhagavan. This is the moksha of the Vaishnava traditions. Not very, very different from the moksha of the Jnana traditions, which is a state of infinite, eternal, Satchidananda, no sense of me. No. If you're infinite, there's no sense of you, because by definition, that which is infinite has no individualizing element. That's a hankara. Bhaktas don't want that. And the Bhagavata is a Vaishnava text. So, therefore, he heard it at the end of Dwapara Yuga, right? He's speaking it now to the king, but it's been transmitted. It's eternal, and it gets transmitted through different lineages, and he heard it in the previous age. And look at this. This verse is also, in a sense, challenging the goal of Advaita Vedanta and of Sankhya and of even Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Although I had attained perfection and I was situated in the state beyond the gunas, what's that then? Svarupa Avasthanam. He'd attained that state. Patanjali calls it Svarupa Avasthanam in the third verse, Nirbija Samadhi, Asampragnata Samadhi. He'd attained it. And the Jnana traditions are the traditions that seek the Atman, but that's the end of the journey. Not for Vaishnavas. He'd attained that, but his mind was captured by the pastimes of Krishna. So Krishna's got nothing to do with the gunas then. You've gone beyond the gunas and not everything connected with the gunas. But Krishna's nothing to do with the gunas. And so Shuka's mind was captivated by Krishna, even though he was situated in the bliss of the Atman. Hence I studied this history, O sagely king. Now, a real jnani doesn't need to study anything. What are you going to study? You've attained the ultimate goal of life. What's there to study? But Shuka, what is he studying? He wants to know more about Krishna. Who's Krishna? Who's Bhagavan? Who's that being that's beyond my own Atman? I've attained my own Atman, okay? I've attained my state infinite, all of that stuff, Satchidananda, right? Ananta, all of the stuff we read about. Oh, attained all of that. But he'd heard about this Krishna who's nothing to do with the gunas, and he becomes attracted to that. That attraction, that desire has got nothing to do with mundane. It's a completely different category of things, nothing to do with raga, with avijja raga. So pay attention to these points. There's a Vaishnava text. The Vaishnavas have a different ontology, a different sort of, they have a different spiritual geography, if you will. That Brahman is just, you know what they say Brahman is? The effulgence of God. The effulgence. Just like the sunlight is the effulgence of the sun. So you could be blinded by the sunlight and not even know there's a sun. It's not a bad analogy. I just was reading it this morning in one of the texts. That this Brahmajyoti, this Brahman, there's infinite and eternal, and the Atman can merge into. No one's denying anything. The Vaishnavas don't deny all the claims of the Jnana traditions. They just say you haven't gone. You haven't. There's something further. So this Brahman is the effulgence, and it blinds. It blinds the Gyanis, so they think so you feel you've attained the ultimate truth. Why are they blinded? Because to attain beyond that, you can't get it by your own meditation. You can't get it by your own willpower. You can't get it by your own knowledge. You can only get it by surrender, devotion, humility. God can't be vanquished by your meditational virtuosity. And so the minute we surrender, then that covering of the light is removed, hiranyamayena patrena, and then Bhagavan reveals his rupa, okay, the form of God. It's very, very different. I know many of us haven't been exposed to this because most of the traditions that have come to the West since the 60s have been Jnana traditions. And Guruji Iyengar, you know, I asked him about this. Well, kind of, not really, but I said, you know. But anyway, one time I met him. So he's a Vaishnava. Krishnamacharya, hardcore Vaishnava. Krishnamacharya was an orthodox Sri Vaishnava, but that aspect of their tradition was not they did not transmit that to the West. So, but it's probably the dominant tradition in India. There are different schools of Vaishnavas, and they're you know, the Sri Vaishnavas all over South India. Up north, you've got the Gaudiyas in Vrindavan and Bengal, the yellow Sikh. All the Vaishnavas have sacred clay going upwards like this. And there's, you know, 6 or 7. One of the newest one is the Swami Narayans. We got a temple down the road here. I've never seen anything like it. If you're living in New Jersey, you've got to check out Bridgewater Swami Narayan Temple. Go online. If they were to have 7 new wonders of the world, my friends, if they were to say, okay, let's start off with 7 ancient ones, and then we have the 7 modern ones, but they're not modern anymore. If we were to have 7 like modern wonders of the world, that's got to be one of them. That's going to be one of them. So the Vaishnavas Vaishnavism is a dominant tradition. It's just, you know why it's challenging to Westerners? This is why I'm writing the book I'm writing, because we don't know what to do with these forms. And we've been told they're mythological. And who told us that? Who told us that? The missionaries in the 18th century. And what are they thinking? Well, they're thinking Old Testament. And thou shalt not have graven images. That's their samskaras. They're indoctrinated into the attitudes of the Old Testament, and they project that onto India, and they see 4-armed Vishnus, and they think that's like Baal of the Old Testament, or one of these Near Eastern deities. And then this whole idea of mythology then starts getting bandied about, and we don't know what to do with the forms. We don't have the samskaras. Our traditions haven't allowed us, haven't given us an opportunity to consider the fact that God must have a form. It has a spiritual form, nothing to do with material form. It's a form of pure consciousness and must have infinite forms because God is infinite. And these are beautiful forms. God must be beautiful. To be beautiful, beauty is form. So we don't have the samskaric equipment, many of us, to know what to do with it. So what do? We hear this term mythology and we say, okay, let's stick it in the category of mythology. Oh, that's convenient. Now we can, put a little Patanjali in the corner of the yoga studio and he can sit there and we ignore him. And that's what we think forms are. So the Bhagavatam is going to undermine all of that if we stick with it. So we should be aware of our own limitations, our own presupposition, and where do they come from? That's what I'm doing in this book. I'm excavating where does this whole anti-form myth idea that God can't have a form, and the idea that the Indian traditions are mythology, where's that come from? That's mythology is a laden term, my friends. It means it's not true. What does it mean, mythology? It's not true. And Indians don't even realize what the term means. They call their own tradition mythology. They don't realize it. So the Bhagavatam is going to hopefully give us new sets of samskaras and force us to reconsider our notion of what God can and can't be. And then, of course, we make our own decision. But first, we need to be exposed to what are these forms then, according to the tradition. So although he had attained perfection and was situated in the state beyond the gunas, says Shuka, his mind was captured by the pastimes of Krishna, lila. That's the fourth thing. Nama, rupa, guna, lila. Write those four things down, my friends, so I don't have to translate them all the time. Nama is the name of a particular manifestation. So Shiva is the nama of a particular form. Vishnu, Narayana, same thing. But the same thing if you didn't know that. Krishna, that's the nama. And each form has a rupa. Each manifestation has a rupa form, very specific form, right? Just look around my room here, and you see Sitaram there, that's a particular form. There's Hanumanji, he has his rupa, he has a nama rupa. Durgaji, she has a nama rupa, and all of them have qualities, right? So what's the quality? What's the guna of Hanumanji? He's an ardent bhakta. He's the quintessential servant. He exemplifies service, love as service. And Durga is, of course, the protector, and she has her qualities, and she has her gunas, she has her weaponry, she has everything specific to her. Okay? And then over here we probably have, what do we have over there? Oh, look, that's Shiva. Beautiful Shiva. All these deities are going to Rome, by the way. I'm going to be selling the house in a few months, and they're all going to Rome. I'm taking them to Rome in 10 days. Got to wrap them all up in foam. So you come and visit me in Rome, and you can have darshan of all these rupas with their gunas, and all of them have leelas, activities specific to them. Okay. So Shuka then says, I will narrate that Purāṇa to you, that meaning this Purāṇa, the Bhagavata. You're a great soul, sir. Now here's the claim of the Bhagavata, my friends, take it or leave it. The Bhagavata claims devotion for Mukunda is awakened in those who have faith in it. If faith, I would say, simply means listen with an open heart. You don't have to believe it. Don't just jump into something dogmatically. But what I hope all of you can bring to this Sangha is not faith. How can you have faith in something you don't know? But what I hope you bring is an open heart. And you're going to be exposed to a tradition, again, not some minor little sect up in the Himalayas no one's ever heard about, like Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Mainstream. This is probably the dominant tradition in India. It just didn't get exported in the counterculture of the 60s. Most of those traditions were Jnana, Advaita traditions. So what I hope if we can bring an open heart, the text claims that with that open heart, the seed of bhakti will be transmitted through the air and enter the heart and plant a seed. And it's called the Bhakti Lata Bij. Once it's there, there's nothing you can do about it. Your mind will be overcome by bhakti. If not in this life, in the next. It doesn't give us a timeline. It doesn't promise it doesn't give us it's not like Pariksha 7 days, but it's a bija, a samskara different from all other samskaras. Other samskaras are pushed by tamas, like what you did in your last life. They're pushed in, what Freud would call the subconscious, and covered by tamas. They're there. Occasionally they pop out, like a deja vu experience or a phobia or something. But for the most part, they're covered. Not Bhakti Lata Bij. So if we don't finish our journey in this life, in our next life, something will happen. You'll encounter a picture of Krishna. All of a sudden, you'll just be instantly attracted, and you'll have no idea why. Or you'll encounter someone speaking about Krishna, or you'll walk into a kirtan and you'll just start crying, and you'll have no idea why. That's because the Bhakti Lata Bija is different from all other. It does not get pushed into the subconscious. It remains there. Gita says at the end of chapter 6, Vasho api, as if by force. It will push its way back into our consciousness, and we pick up the journey again in the next life if we don't finish. Well, I certainly won't finish in this life, but perhaps some of you will, in which case, drag me along with you. Right then. Now, one of the question was, what is to be japyam, gerandiv? What is to be chanted? The chanting of the name of Hari, right? So that would be, my own mantra is the Hare Krishna mantra. right? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But the Bhagavata Purāṇa doesn't actually mention that mantra. That was introduced in the 16th century by Chaitanya. The Bhagavata Purāṇa has two other names of Hari. Om Namo Narayanaya, which if you're looking for a mantra, then any or an Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, which Jessica started us off with at the beginning. So those are the two mantras in the Bhagavata. So that's three mantras. The Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You could, if you wanted to start a japa practice, you could take that, or you could take Om Namo Narayanaya, especially if you have a connection with Guruji Iyengar or somehow you have faith, because usually you get the mantra from a guru, someone you have faith in, right? Because you don't know. How do we know? So we typically get our mantras from a great being that we study their lives. We observe them, and we feel we trust them completely. They seem impeccable. They're not trying to rip us off. They want nothing from us. They're renounced. They're just benevolent beings. They just here for our welfare. So then we take the mantra from a person like that. So if you have faith in Krishnamacharya or Guruji Iyengar, then you might like to take the mantra of that tradition, which is Om Namo Narayanaya. If you feel you want to start, my mantra is the Hare Krishna mantra. I've been chanting that for 45 years. So I have such a deep groove that it's just there in my mind pretty much all the time. But I actually quite like Om Namo Bhagavate, but personally I quite like Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, but it's too late. I received my mantra and I'm quite happy with it. But anyway, you can take these are the mantras, okay? The Vaishnava mantras. There's others as well. Sri Krishna Charanamam, that would be the Vallabha one, Sri Krishna Charanamam. So, different Vaishnava lineages have their own, Krishna mantras. The Nimbarkis have, instead of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram. By the way, that Ram is not Ram of the Ramayana. It's Rama meaning the enjoyer. So it's also a name of Krishna. Rama means the Sanskrit root Ram means to enjoy. So Rama means the enjoyer. But the house, literally, we share where I stay in India. The one place where my friend Lakshman, his wall right next to it is the Nimbarki ashram, and they chant, instead of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, they chant Radhe Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Radhe Radhe, Radhe Sham, Sham Sham, Radhe Radhe. So they're real Radhe Krishna bhaktas. It's quite beautiful. So there's all of these options, okay? Within Vaishnavism, and of course Shaivism would have its names of Ishwara, and likewise Devi. The mother has her various names, Kali, Durgai, Om Durgyai Namaha.
Professor, you have been recording for an hour now.
Okay. So stop. What do I do? I say share. Stop share. But don't go jumping around. It's not Ben and Jerry's. And don't think, we've commodified everything. Don't think this idea that different mantras have different physiological effects. That's nothing to do with bhakti. It may be the case. There's Shakta mantras, but that's Vaishnavas have no interest in that. They want bhakti, love mantras. If you're your beloved, you don't go running around and checking out other possible lovers, do you? Bhakti is very monogamous. So all of these mantras that you get, coming out of often Shakta traditions that have physiological, you awaken this chakra, that chakra, nothing wrong with them, but nothing to do with bhakti. They have nothing to do with love of God. So just be clear about that. Those are physiological mantras. And those are a very different category of thing than what we're talking about here. So I stop. Okay. And then we go to share. And on we go. So the chanting of the name of Hari, right, in response to what it should be, Japyam, with the Y, Gerundiv. The chanting of the name of Hari has been prescribed for those yogis who are disinterested in material enjoyment and who desire freedom from fear. This is not some physiological Shakta, chakra-related kind of mantra. Yogis are disinterested in all of that. They're not looking for physiological, nothing wrong with that. with physiological alignment, and so on and so forth. What is the use of many years squandered mindlessly by a deluded person? How about that's me and you, my friends? Squandering our time, just, looking for things to do, and, it was mindlessly. Not all of it useless at the moment of death. What's the use of many years squandered mindless? Squandered meaning anything that's not connected to the path of bhakti for the Bhagavatam. It's squandered. That doesn't mean we can still have families and professions, but in our minds, all of that, we're offering all of that to Bhagavan. We're always thinking, how can I make this duty a service rather than a boga, rather than trying to enjoy it for myself, trying to get boga. Boga means to try to manipulate prakriti in order to enjoy it for one's ahankara. Let it be known, it's better for 1 hour to be spent than a whole lifetime squandered mindlessly. 1 hour. If we have that 1 hour where we really, really, really reach a place of deep sincerity, bang, that's the samskara. And even if we just that 1 hour, then we go back to squandering, that 1 hour, that samskara will reemerge next life. So let it be known that it's better for 1 hour to be spent striving for one's ultimate welfare, not this mindless squandering. And then he gives an example to Parikshit of a forefather of Parikshit. So the kings like to talk about their forefathers, and they like to, usually in the Mahabharata, it's more kind of a warrior thing, where you talk about your forefathers, especially if you want to get someone to fight. You say, well, your forefather, and you try to sort of incite notions of heroism based on, your family line, your reputation, and your forefathers did this, that, and the other. So it's kind of a warrior thing. But here he's doing it as a kind of a yogic thing. And he says, after the sage king, right? This is the Raja Rishi. It's a Raja, but it's a Rishi. So they are sage kings. So they rule the world, but they're sages. So they experience their Atman, and many of them are great bhaktas of Bhagavan. Remember, that's two different things. I'm going to keep repeating it. I don't care how many times. We got to get this into our heads because we're so indoctrinated that, Atman, 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 Brahman, Brahman, Brahman. We got to get into our heads. There's two different things. There's your Atman and there's Bhagavan, and they're two different kinds of experiences. They're different categories. They're not alternatives or two sides of the same goal. They are different categories of things. Your own Atman, individual Atman. It's an individual in Vaishnavism. You never cease to be an individual. You don't merge into something else, some greater Brahman. That's Advaita Vedanta. It's not any of the other schools. It's not yoga. It's not Sankhya. It's not Nyaya. It's not Vaisheshika. It's not Mimamsa. The 6 schools, which is a fiction. But even those 6 schools, 5.5, the Atman is eternally an individual. It's only Advaita Vedanta that individuality is an illusion that evaporates upon enlightenment. That's Advaita's view. But they all share the view that the Atman is infinite and eternal. They share a lot, Advaita Vedanta and the other traditions. Okay, but Bhagavan is a different category of thing. In Advaita Vedanta, Bhagavan is illusory. This is why the Vaishnavas, the objective of Advaita Vedanta, they get very upset because Advaita is trying to evaporate their beloved Ishwara. So that's why Ramanuja, his commentary is like 500 pages, 100 pages. Before he even starts 111, before he starts the first verse of the Vedanta Sutra, chapter 1, Adhyaya 1, verse 1, before he even takes it on 100 pages, he rebuts what he calls the Mahapurva Paksha, the great opposing point of view. That's Advaita. 100. Why does he do that? It's not because Shankara says the world is unreal. Who cares? Vaishnavas say it's real, but everybody agrees it's temporary. That's not the issue. Is the soul an individual? Fine. Vaishnavas say eternal individual. Advaita says no. But both agree that when you're in the state of Swarup Vavastanam, your experience is infinite, eternal, and blissful. So practically speaking, they share the same view in that regard. So that's not the issue. What is the issue? The issue is that Shankara says the world is unreal, the creation is unreal, therefore the creator is unreal. That's the issue. And there's no way the Vaishnavas are gonna play dead if you start telling them their beloved Bhagavan is illusory. So that's where the main focus of the debate and the rejection of the Vaishnavas of that aspect of Advaita Vedanta. Otherwise, they accept, they revere Shankara, they respect Shankara and they honor Shankara. They just don't sign off on that. So, and they have to defend their tradition. Now, this sage king Kartavanga, after he also found out what remained of his life in the world. I can't remember the story, but footnote number 1, if anybody has the blue book, we can look that up. It's probably in the footnotes. I can't remember now. Right, doesn't matter. When he found out, he renounced everything in an instant and dedicated himself to Hari, who bestows fearlessness. So Shuka is trying to give King Parikshit an example of someone who exactly in Parikshit's situation, also a great king and a revered predecessor. And basically he's sort of saying, well, he did it and you can do it. It's kind of like, I guess it's psychological. He's being strategic here. There is a limit, O Kodava, right? Parikshit is, basically the Kurus. Usually the term Kurus is used for the other side on the Mahabharata war. There's the Pandavas and the Kurus, but technically they're all Kurus. They're all descendants of Kuru. So here he's calling Parikshit, who is actually the great grandson of Arjuna. So he should have been called a Pandava, but they're all Kurus actually, technically. So there's a limit, O Kaurava, to your lifespan. 7 days. Take all steps necessary to prepare for death during this time. When the end comes, a person should sever desire for this body and all that is associated with it, family, possessions, and the like, with the weapon of detachment free from fear. My friends, if you're on your deathbed, don't be having your dog sitting there and your family and calling your kids. Say goodbye a week before. You don't want to be surrounded by your attachments. It's a serious business. You explain to your kids, look, we give you blessings, give all your stuff. Here, take the house, go on. Right? And take the longboat, and the harmonium, take everything you got. But you want to be alone, my friends. Take this seriously. Because if your mind is, you don't know when you're going to die. You don't know the actual minute. It's very hard to tell when the soul leaves the body. Because there's a period of, it's very hard to tell because the breathing slows down really, really slow. Unless you're hooked up to some machine, I don't know. But if you're dying at home, how do you know? So don't be surrounded by attachments. That final moment, what can they do for you anyway? What can they do for you anyway? And plus, you don't want them to witness it. Why do you want them to witness it? That's not, it's not nice on your kids and your family. Tell them, explain what you're doing, and they'll respect you. Set an example. You set an example of how to die. It's very serious. My dad, he really inspired me on his deathbed. He wasn't a yogi or anything. He was just a dharmic Englishman. Right. So you should sever desire for this body, all that's associated with it, with the weapon of detachment, free from fear, with mind fixed. One should leave home alone, wash in the waters of a sacred place, sit on a seat prepared according to prescriptions, right? So kusha grass, all of that. Not super important, but, it's part of the culture. One should concentrate on the 3 constituent phonemes of Om, right? Om is actually, it's not Om, it's actually Aum, because O is a conjunct vowel. A conjunct vowel. Right, you have simple vowels, a, I, u, and in Sanskrit, r or ri. That's a simple vowel. It's not, if you put it in one of those machines, it's just a simple vowel. Then you have 2 vowels joined together. Actually, O and A are actually 2 vowels. We don't think of it that way, but if you put it through, O is actually A and U, and A is actually A and E. So Om is actually 3. It has 3. It's Aum. So sometimes that's why you see it written A-U-M. O is actually A-U. So there's 3 constituents of the sound Om. That's what it's saying, and that's a fact. So one should concentrate on the three constituent phonemes of Om, the great and pure Brahman in the form of sound, right from the beginning of the Upanishad, especially the Mandukya. It's all about Om. It is, notice it doesn't say the symbol of the great and pure Brahman. It is the great and pure Brahman in the form of sound. And of course, if you're a devotee of Krishna, then your Om extends into Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And the Krishna mantra, the theologians say Om actually reverberates within it. So Om is retained, but it's a seed, and seeds produce fruits. You put an apple tree, a seed in the ground, it produces an apple tree with a particular fruit. So Om then in devotion manifests its rupa and guna in the form of Om Namo Narayanaya and so forth. So Om means Om and the extension of Om in the extension of the name of the extensions of Om in the form of fully manifest, not a seed, but fully manifest nama rupa guna. So now we have Patanjali and yoga. And it's not the only form. This is not the only way of dying, by the way. This is just one method. This is the Patanjalian method. Right? Restrain one's mind, that's nirodha. Control one's breathing, pranayama. Keeping one's mind fixed on that seed of Brahman, which is dhyana dharana, right? So Patanjali says this. He says, Ishwara tasya vachaka pranavaha. Ishwara manifests as Om. And tajapa tadartha bhavanam. You should do japa on it, keeping in mind what it is. It's God, it's Narayana. Surrender to the sound. So this is classical now Patanjalian yoga, okay? With the intelligence as the driver, right? When you're doing Chitta Vritti Nirodha, we all know what that means. You're stilling the mind, a la Patanjali, right? So you're doing Om, 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 right? And then your mind gets distracted by something. You start thinking of email, right? So Om, Om, Om. It's coming out your mouth, but the mind's gone off to thinking about email. Then another voice, you might be gone for 2-3 minutes without realizing it. Then another voice, brings it back. That's the Nirodha Samskara. That's the intelligence as the driver. Okay, so within the mind, you have the lower mind, you have the manas, and you have the buddhi. Sankhya even divides it up into two. Yoga just talks about chitta, but Sankhya talks about two, buddhi and manas. So the driver is the buddhi. Buddhi is the one, and Patanjali has a nice word for it. When you're doing nirodha, you're stilling the mind. Who's nirodhaing? And he calls it the Nirodha Samskara, also known as the Virama Pratyaya in Patanjali. Okay, so with the intelligence as the driver, and you can look at the footnote, I have no idea what I've put there. One should remove the senses from the sense objects by means of the mind. So now the mind, because the mind is the doorkeeper, it's the sixth sense because it has a relationship with the senses on the outside and a relationship with emotions and etc. on the inside. So that's pratyahara, which is the fifth limb of yoga, removing the senses from the sense objects, pratyahara. If one's mind becomes disturbed by agitation, one should focus in on the desired object, Lord Krishna, by means of the intelligence. So you get distracted, the intelligence drags you back. You never say you can't do it. Don't give up. Don't give up. It's hard work, meditation, my friends. And we have this silly, romantic idea of meditation. We can sit there with the sound of harps and running water. It had nothing to do with it. Meditation is hard work. You fix the mind, wanders off, bring it back, wanders off, bring it back, wanders off, bring it back. It's a hard work. So that's the intelligence that's bringing it back. The mind itself is wandering. So that's the lower and the higher aspect of the chitta, which Sankhya calls buddhi and manas. Now here is a different kind of meditation where your mind is fixed not on Om, but you fix it on the form of Bhagavan. One should meditate on one limb of the Lord with uninterrupted mind. This is why the Bhagavatam is full of descriptions, and they're very repetitive. Krishna, he wears a garland of forest flowers. He wears a yellow dhoti. He has the flute. His form is bent in 3 places. He has, beautiful hair. He has lotus eyes. He wears earrings. He has armlets. He has bracelets. Again and again and again and again. Why? Because you have to internalize it. Remember, there was no books back then. You heard this, so you had to hear it and hear it and hear it. You fix it in your mind. So why? So when you sit to meditate, all of that, when you've heard it so many times, every time you hear it, it's leaving the samskaras. Now you're sitting to meditate. You can, or those samskaras, you can activate them in your mind, and you form a deity made of samskaras. There are different kinds of deities. They can be made of marble, brass, diamond, picture, anything, but they can be made of mind stuff. And what's mind stuff? Nothing other than samskara. So you create an internal image, an internal murti. Murti means a deity, internal. And to do that, you have to hear it and hear it and hear it. Each time you reinforce it, reinforce it, reinforce it, reinforces. So this is one type of meditation, not the only type. One type of devotional meditation on Bhagavan as a person. So you fix the mind. Right? Meditate on one limb of the Lord with uninterrupted mind. After controlling the mind and removing it from sense objects, one should not think of anything else. You fix it on the rupa, the form. The mind should take pleasure there alone, the supreme destination of Vishnu. At a certain point, that mental samskaric image at the very end, what's the grand finale? It dissolves and the actual Brahman form of Bhagavan manifests. No different from Advaita Vedanta. You fix your mind on Om, 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 right? It's a sound. It's a mundane sound. But at a certain point, that dissolves and is replaced by an experience of infinite, all-pervading Satchidananda Brahman. It's the same. You have to use the mind. The mind is indispensable for any form of meditation. Who's meditating? Not the Atman. It's the mind that's meditating. So the mind is the gateway. And the mind has to be fixed on something. In Advaita Vedanta, it's fixed on the impersonal, the Om aspect of reality. And in Vaishnavism, on the personal. Okay? Is this all? I'm going to repeat this and repeat it and repeat it. So the svadhyaya is repetitive, just like asana is repetitive. You don't say, well, we did that asana before. No, you do it again and again. Each time you go deeper and deeper. I've been reading this Bhagavata for 48 years. Every time it's completely new. And there's no text like that. You read some mundane text. You read it once, twice, 3 times, and then you're sick to death of it. Not Bhagavatam. Same with mantra. Never get tired of it. So there's something about this. What is it about it? It has divine presence. You never get sick of divine presence. It's eternally intriguing. Normally, verse 20, one's mind is harassed by rajas, right? Rajas means we're plagued by infinite desires, constantly desiring, imagining, fantasizing, dreaming we're our soulmate, we're looking for a partner, we're looking for fame, we're looking for whatever it is. So that's all rajas. And deluded by tamas. Tamas is lethargy, depression, lack of interest in anything, procrastination. So our minds are harassed by these gunas. A wise person should control the mind by dharana, which is the 7th limb of yoga, concentration, and destroy all the impurities created by it, right? How do you destroy the impurities, the klesha? Patanjali says, Yoganga Anushtanat Ashuddhi Kshaye. You destroy the Ashuddhi. In the first verse as well. Tapaha Svadhyaya Ishwara Pranidhana Kriya Yoga Kleshatanu Karana. You weaken the kleshas. By Kriya Yoga, Kleshatanu is the phrase. You weaken the impurities. And later on in verse 28-29, Ashuddhi Kshaye. By Yoganga Anushtana. By following the limbs, Ashuddhi Kshaye. So in both instances, whether the Kriya Yoga at the first verse or the introduction to the Ashtanga Yoga, why do we do this? Ashuddhi Kshaye, to remove the impurities, or in the beginning, Klesha Tanu, to weaken the kleshas. So that's the same kind of thing here. Destroy all the impurities. This is all coming out. This is all coming out of the same tradition. It's just that Patanjali, even though Ishwara is there, and even though you're supposed to fix your mind on Ishwara through japa, tadartha, japa tadartha bhavanam, but the goal is not Ishwara. Even though Ishwara is in Patanjali, the goal is not love of God. He didn't tell us anything about Ishwara. He just says he's supremely omniscient, he's the guru of the ancient, he's beyond klesha karma, and he can give you samadhi. A wise yogi is going to say, okay, you can give me samadhi, but who is this Ishwara? Who's beyond the gunas, right? Klesha karma, right? Ishvara Purusha Vishesha. Klesha, he's unaffected and abhichinnaha. And he's the guru of the ancients. That means he must be eternal. He taught the ancients. So where is he? Who is he? Why aren't we asking that question, those of us who read Patanjali as our canonical yoga text? You do a yoga teacher training program. If you do a teacher training program now in the West, many of them, you do 20 hours of Patanjali. Why aren't we asking, who's this Ishwara? He's not the Ishwara of Advaita Vedanta because he's eternal. He's an eternal being. He's a Purusha Vishesha. Why aren't we asking that? Well, one reason is Patanjali doesn't tell us, because Ishwara and Patanjali gives us samadhi. But what if someone says, wait, hang on a minute, before I enter into this samadhi, which, and before I do that, who's Ishwara? Maybe I should try to find out a little bit about Ishwara. And if Patanjali doesn't tell you, then you've got to go somewhere else to find out about Ishwara. Where are you going to go? The Gita tells you a lot more, but not that much more. Krishna says, fix your mind on me, yogi nama pisarvesham, madgatein antaratma, of all yogis, the bhakta is the best. He'll say that kind of thing, but he doesn't really tell you that much about himself, other than, I am the highest truth, or even these vague things. Where are you going to go? Bhagavata Purāṇa is the place to go in the Krishna tradition for more information about Ishwara. If you're a Shaiva Bhakta, you go to the Shiva Purāṇa. Or if you're a Durga Bhakta, you the Durga text. You go. There's a Devi Mahatmya. There's a Devi Bhagavata Purāṇa. So you have to go to the Puranas if you want more information about Ishwara, my friends. And the Puranas haven't really, taken root in the West. Why not? Because they have these forms of God, and we don't know what to do with them. Because Moses comes down the mountain with his 10 commandments, and the Israelites are worshiping the golden, and he gets all upset, and he chastises the Israelites, and then the 10 commandments, thou shalt not have any, and we got this imprinted in our minds, whether we believe in it or not. It's still part of our cultural inheritance. So we end up with those samskaras that are averse from the get-go to the idea that God has a form, the idea that deity worship is one of the beautiful ways of engaging bhakti. We start off with the klesha, a dvesha, an aversion to it, whether we know it or not. We start off, and then we're told it's mythology. Okay, that works. Mythology. Maybe it has some cultural value, but it's not. It's nothing that. And once you start saying it's mythology and it has cultural value, well, then it's not our culture, is it? So then we don't relate to it. So let's break out of that. Because those ideas came from the colonial period. Those ideas came from missionaries. Who's a missionary? A missionary is someone. Well, how can you be a missionary unless you think your religion is superior to the natives? There's no other way you can missionize. The only way you can missionize is to tell yourself the story that your religion is better than the inferior one of the natives. That's mission. We still want to. Is that the story we want to tell ourselves? So we don't realize we have these bonds. We have these restrictions in our way of understanding what's going on in Vaishnavism. So let's at least be aware of them. Number one, let's be aware of them. And number two, let's be open-hearted and willing to cast them asunder, and let's let the Bhagavata Purāṇa tell its own story without us throwing our Abrahamic baggage at it. Because that's what's happening. Consciously or unconsciously. It's Abrahamic baggage. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to the Abrahamic tradition. Baggage means whatever was relevant to the Old Testament Moses and the tribes of Israel and the Israelites and whatever that story is, has nothing to do with the story that's going on in India 2,000 years ago. So don't project one on the other, knowingly or unknowingly. I'm just urging us to be at least aware of that. That's all. So, now, while this concentration on Lord Vishnu, on the refuge, the sharana, the shelter of Lord Vishnu, is being practiced, when we do this, what happens? The symptoms of bhakti appear in the yogi. That means, we start to feel ecstasy. Sometimes we start to, physiological symptoms like tears in the eyes, horripilation, which sounds awful, but horripilation is when your hair stands on end. And sometimes you probably all experience it. In a kirtan, in a good kirtan, you feel like a little bit of a it's horripilation. It's basically it's bhav. It's kind of the preliminary symptoms of love, and it manifests in the body by tears and by a prickling of the hair, actually. And the word for it is an awful word, horripilation. It sounds like horrid, but it's horripilation. Look it up, horripilation. Who came up with that? But in Sanskrit, it's bhav. Now then, so this yoga, which is most auspicious, bhakti, quickly manifests. Sri Shuka said, the path of the Vedic scriptures is such that one's intelligence puzzles over the meaningless words. It's so funny. This is 2,000 years ago, and they thought nobody has a clue what the Rig Veda. Half of the Rig Veda, nobody understands it. And 2,000 years ago, the Bhagavatam is saying, what are these words in the Vedas? That is ancient, the Rig Veda. We don't know what it means. Half of those, the old Vedic texts, half of it's incomprehensible. If the Bhagavatam's saying that, it's one thing academic scholars saying that, and they're quite offensive. And then, people don't say that anymore in academia, but they would have done, 100 years ago in the colonial period, they would have talked about the meaningless words of the Vedas. The Bhagavatam itself is saying it 2,000 years ago. The meaningless words. I love it. I hadn't noticed that before. I'm going to try to remember that one. One's intelligence puzzles over the meaningless words. Wandering in here and there in the world of Maya, okay, that's the word for illusion. It's the same thing as avidya. Usually we use avidya for our own individual ignorance, and Maya is more cosmic, right? The ignorance that covers all beings, but the words are interchangeable, Maya and avidya. So one does not attain one's goal doing all this meaningless Vedic stuff. Right, and that would again go and plug it into our day. That would be all this our own equivalent of that. Asking God for stuff and doing rituals as a Catholic or a Christian or anything, some New Agey or whatever, some Santeria or any kind of ritual. You don't attain the real goals. You might get some temporary thing, but not real goals. Just like a sleeping person does not attain his goals through dreams. And what are dreams? They're made of memory imprints, right? So when you dream, what's happening? The samskaras from the day, right? Samskaras that come into your mind during the day, they sit in the chitta, and then when you sleep, you go through a REM, right? And REM is when these samskaras get agitated, but you have no control over them. So your dreams come out weird and wonderful. And then you go into non-REM, and then you come out of REM. So dream is actually samskaras. So the Mandukya Upanishad, there's 4 states of consciousness: waking, dream, deep sleep, and it just says the 4th. Doesn't even give it a name because it's beyond name. And that's the Svarupa Vastanam of Patanjali. 4 states of consciousness. The Mandukya, very small little Upanishad, just has a dozen verses, half of them dedicated to Om. Well, the whole thing is dedicated to Om.
Sorry, Edwin, and who gives the name Turiya?
The Mandukya Upanishad, the 4th, Turiya.
Oh.
And elsewhere it's called the Chaturta, same thing, the 4th. So look at the Mandukya, it's the Turiya. And you name the other ones, you say waking, dream, 4th, and then you just say the 4th. What point are you making? You're saying it's beyond, it's not a samskara. It's not, for something to have a name, it has to have a shape or a form. It has to be different from other things. If you name something, for it to be a thing that has a name that's distinct, it has to be distinct from other things. So the world of Namarupa is an Advaita thing. We were talking about Namarupa of Bhagavan, but now Namarupa, completely different context. Namarupa in actually, this is an Advaitin type of phraseology, that this world is, what is the world out there? We perceive things, right? And we perceive just differences. So here we have a plant behind me and a picture on the wall, and so there's differences, and so that rupa, this rupa of the picture, which is different from the rupa, the form of the plant, and because it has a difference, we can give it a name. So if you give something a name, it means it's different from something else. You give a different name. So that's the world of Namarupa. And so when you get to something beyond the world, like the experience of pure Atman, how can you name it? It's not a thing. And so they just call it the fourth. You want to refer to it, but you also want to make a point. It's not a nama rupa like everything else. So you don't give it a name like you would give, right? So the other three states of consciousness you can name: waking, dream, deep sleep. But you want to make a point that this is not like a nameable thing. So, but you still want to refer to it, so you've got to come up with something. So you just say it the fourth. That's the logic of that word. Okay, therefore a sage who is not deluded, but whose intelligence is fixed on the self, should accept whatever things are necessary for accomplishing this purpose and no more. We should just accept what is useful for our ultimate goals in life. My friends, it's so important to study these texts, to get inspiration, so we always remember the goal of life. Even Patanjali, which I would barely, it's not a bhakti text, even though it's a theistic text. Okay, it's theistic, Ishwara is there. It's not bhakti, no bhakti there. But what does he say? Kriya Yoga. In the second chapter, what do you do if you want to be a yogi? What kriya, what actions do you do? First is tapaha. But the second is svadhyaya. Study. If you want to be yogis and yoginis, my friends, here's what you do. Toss out your television. Stick it on the sidewalk with a sign, working order, free, take me home. And that nonsense time you're sitting there watching Netflix, use it for svadhyaya. That's a yogi life. That's the life of a yogi. Practical, instant. I did it right there in the front. Stop no, hang on, that was something else. Forget that. But I did stick a telly out when I was a student in Colombia. Somebody gave me a telly and I stuck it out in the front. And okay, doesn't matter. But I'm serious. We have to keep ourselves inspired. We have to keep reminding ourselves, because otherwise we get engulfed by the consumer society. Everywhere we go, we're bombarded with signals of consumption. We forget. So svadhyaya is so important, my friends. Even half an hour a day, even just doing this together, we get inspired. That's why I'm doing it. You all think I'm a nice guy. You think, oh, he's a nice professor. He gives these free classes. I'm doing it for me as well. I'm doing it so that my mind is absorbed in this text. There's no such thing as teacher and student. There's no such thing. We're just fellow travelers, and this text is an opportunity for us to absorb our minds in ultimate truths. Right now, one should not struggle for anything more than what you need to attain the goal of yoga. You need food, you need a place to rest, you need, Krishna says in Gita, you should eat not too much, not too little, all of that, middle path kind of stuff, right? Buddha was a wonderful example of that, because he started off as a massive hedonist in the royal palace, and then he went to massive austerity in the forest, unprecedented. And then he sort of came out in the middle, and the middle path is one of the the original teachings of the Buddha, that all scholars agree that this was original, right? Because scholars, all the Mahayana stuff and all of that, they're going to say that was all developed centuries later. But when scholars try to reconstruct, same with Jesus of Nazareth, right? You try to reconstruct, you compare Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you try to create, and there's conflicts and differences, and you try to figure out what was original. There was even right here at Rutgers, when I first came in the department, one of my colleagues was involved in the Jesus seminar, and they went through the New Testaments and they color coded it. So red was very likely in the original. Pink, they would actually color code the entire testaments, and they would have red. I can't remember whether red was least likely or most likely, but anyway, red was very likely original. Then pink was maybe, and then they had another color which was very unlikely that it was actually goes back to the actual Christ. So the Buddhist scholars then did the same kind of thing to the Buddha 400 years later. But one of the things they all agree on is this middle path, the Four Noble Truths. They say what goes back to the historical Buddha and the middle path. So the middle path is there in the Gita. These things are not Buddhist. Even the word nirvana is not Buddhist, and the word nirvana is twice in the Gita it's used. So these are terms that were common to all the yogis. And then later on they become identified with particular streams. Okay, so middle path, right? Right. One should not struggle for anything more than this, realizing that doing so would be simply labor for nothing. We labor to maintain these big houses, these opulent houses, all of our effects, and for nothing. They're all going to, how did he use it? We get old and we can't even maintain them anymore. And even our families and all of that, kids are going to leave. I mean, it's not that we don't love our kids, but these are all, what did he call them before? Fallible soldiers. Remember, just a few verses ago. They're fallible, illusory. They're not going to stick with us. So that's what he's saying here. Realizing that doing so, right, we keep attached to all our things, is simply labor for nothing. Then none of this stuff is helpful at the moment of death. It's a simple life. And, and we all need to encourage each other. Now, of course, this is a sadhu life. When the ground is there, what is the use of endeavoring for beds? He's being a bit rhetorical, but actually, this is actually the real sadhus, which are still a living tradition in India. We lost this in Europe in the Middle Ages. We used to have wandering Christian, renunciates in Europe and especially East Europe, but still very alive in India. When two arms belong to oneself by nature, what's the use of pillows? When there are two hands, what is the use of a variety of implements for food? You don't need knives and forks. And when nakedness or the bark of trees is available, what's the use of clothes? Right? So when Rama renounces, is it Rama? Or maybe it's Parikshit. When he renounces, he puts on bark. So you put on bark garments. Bit itchy, you'd think. So make sure there's no bugs in it. Anyway. Are there no torn clothes discarded on the road? Do the trees who maintain others no longer give alms? Can't you sleep under the tree? Have the rivers dried up? Well, I don't know about nowadays. You'd probably die of contamination if you drank river water. Are the caves closed? Does the Almighty Hari not protect his devotees? Why don't we have faith that God will provide all our needs? Why should wise people serve those who are blinded by the pride of wealth? Right? We work for people, our bosses, who are, even Rutgers University's become like a big corporation, money-making corporation now. So why should we why should we become slaves, thinking we need to maintain ourselves? We become slaves of those attached to wealth. That's what the text is saying. Basically saying, live simply. It is the Atman that is the cherished goal. And not just that, it is a part of the unlimited Bhagavan. We're not God, my friends. We are ankshas, a part, tiny little sparks. If we were God, how the hell do we end up in Maya? Just ask that very simple, obvious question. If we are God, how the hell is it we can't even control our bowel movements? But to speak of create a universe. This just delusional. But we're parts of God. It is a part of the unlimited Bhagavan. The Atman is self-manifest, right? It's not created. So the Indian traditions, all of them, the idea of creatio ex nihilo, that God creates a soul from nothing, that doesn't make any sense. They would not accept that. How, because something can be created, it can be destroyed. So then it's not eternal. So they wouldn't subscribe to that idea of in creatio ex nihilo. You probably heard that phrase. It is self-manifest. It's not created. Self-manifest means it's eternal. And it's perfect, and it lies within one heart, meaning that's the center of gravity for consciousness. Consciousness pervades the body, so just like the light of the sun, right, or a light of an electric bulb, it's situated on the ceiling, but from there it pervades the room. So where's the Atman actually situated? It's actually minuscule. It's infinitesimally small. It is a substance. It's a substance, but it's infinitesimally small. So where is it located? It's located in the area of the heart, and from there it permeates the body. So when the texts talk about the heart, they're not talking about the physical organ of the heart. They're talking about the location from which consciousness pervades the rest of the body through the subtle body. So consciousness pervades the subtle body, and the subtle body pervades the gross body. This Atman is the goal that one should fix in mind and worship contentedly. It is in this way that the cause of samsara is brought to an end. What is the cause of samsara? Attachment to bhoga. As long as we desire prakriti, then we remain in prakriti. We die and we have all our desires, and we didn't try. Maybe we didn't even think we were supposed to remove the desires. Are like anchors. Every desire, if we die with desires, then the desires have a shakti. They have a shakti. Shak. A shak means a force that enables. So when you die with desires, those desires are a force that propel the subtle body into another body, which is determined according to karma and according to the mind at the moment of death. It's the desires that are the propelling mechanism. They're the fuel of samsara. That's why, read the Gita. I had a student did a paper. How many times does give up desire? How many times does it occur in the Gita? Something like a third of all verses, a couple of hundred verses out of 700. Chapter 2, every Arjuna asks Krishna, who is the Sthitadhi? Who is the realized yogi? And Krishna, he says, one who has given up desires, given up desires, given up desire, repeats again and again and again. Okay, we should probably leave some time for. We'll do one more verse and leave some time for if you have questions. Upon seeing people fallen into the Vaitarani river, which is a river, like a bit like Hades, actually. Remember, the Romans were Indo-Europeans, so there's bits and pieces of the shared culture that that are still preserved in the Greco-Roman traditions, because it's all coming from Indo-European. Indo-European is not just a language; it's also a shared culture. The names of the Greek-Roman pantheon and the names of the Vedic celestials are common. You can trace the common etymologies. You can still see it even through the mists of thousands of years of history and separation. You can still see the etymological relationship of Kazantzas wrote a paper on this, and I didn't realize how many names of the other Western, not just Greco-Roman, but Slavic and other Western traditions. I didn't realize how many of them you could still see the cognate, meaning the essential verbal root, or the nominal root, is still connected to the Vedic ones. So this idea that there's a river, right? That you kind of and there are hellish realms. Not hell like forever and ever and ever hells, but hells until you burn up whatever pocket of karma requires you to go to hell. I mean, if you're Adolf Hitler, every person that you cause suffering to, it's equal and opposite. It's cause and effect. Now you have to experience every single, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Gaza. Those responsible for that, and vice versa, in both sides, those responsible for that they have to whatever suffering they inflict on others, they have to experience. Now, either, let's say you're Adolf Hitler and you're responsible for the death of, I don't know, 2 million people. either you die 2 million times under the same conditions, or you can pack all of that reaction into bodies that are specially designed to suffer without losing consciousness. And they're hellish realms where you get these hellish bodies where you can suffer much more than we can suffer. We use consciousness at a certain point and we can't enjoy. Same with the celestial realms, but the reverse, right? We can only enjoy a certain amount. But there are realms which allow incredibly good karma to be experienced and incredibly bad karma to be experienced. But in either case, it's temporal because it's karmic. And once those units, whether good or bad, are burnt up, then you come back. But there's a river. That's the point. So seeing people falling into the Vaitarani river on the way to hell and experiencing the suffering generated by their karma, this is a benevolent, empathetic being. You feel compassion. Who other than a beast, right? Animals. But even animals are compassionate. You go on YouTube and there's all these, you see these little, I don't know if they're fake or AI, but you see these animals like saving little kids or, elephants doing altruistic acts to, baby, whatever, lions, you see altruism even in YouTube's full of them. I don't know how, some of them seem to be a bit artificially composed. He's saying, oh, other than the beast wouldn't feel compassion, but I'm saying even beasts actually do. All right. Oh, other than a beast would neglect contemplating on the supreme, instead of doing bhakti yoga, engage in immoral behavior, engage in adharmic behavior just simply to gratify the senses. Only a beast. Okay, my friends, it's 5:52, and we'll have a few minutes for questions, if anybody.
I have one.
Yes, Eleonora.
What is the guna of Bhagavan?
But gunas are used in two different ways. Guna simply means quality.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the three gunas of Prakriti.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah,
okay. And
that's
when we talk about saguna, the gunas of Bhagavan, it's a completely different usage of the term guna. And it refers to Bhagavan's qualities. So what are the qualities of Bhagavan? Well, the different.
Omni.
Yeah, well, he has omni qualities, but the different forms have distinctive guna. So Krishna's guna is sweetness and love.
Okay.
So he hides his majesty. Krishna hides his power. So one of the gunas of God is omnipotency, omnipower. But Krishna hides that power. What's the quality of Krishna, not of Narayana. Narayana doesn't hide his power. His power he's majestic right from the get-go. And Vishnu is majestic right from the get-go. But majesty creates awe and reverence and respect and wonder and, it's all good. But it doesn't engender love. So to have love, you have to hide power, just like a parent hides the power and sits on the floor with a little child and plays, doctors and nurses. So that's the hiding of power is one of the gunas of Krishna. And that's why he manifests in Vrindavan and he takes the form of a little child and a toddler just to please his devotees. He doesn't have to do that. So that's a quality. And, so all of these are qualities, mercy, kindness, Rama is very dharmic, is the quality of dharma, heroism, so they could be infinite qualities. But that's the guna. Then when we use it for Bhagavan, has nothing to do with the three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas. That's the point that needs to be understood. Marcia.
Edwin, thank you. So you mentioned two mantras, and we can understand, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That's because Vasudeva was Krishna's father back there in the jail. Okay, but the other one that is a name for Vishnu, Narayana. I have never understood where that name is coming from. Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, but one thing though, the Vasudeva is not the Krishna's father is Vasudeva.
Oh, I know. So Vasudeva then is the son.
Yeah.
Vasudeva.
Okay, yeah. And Vasudeva means actually technically means the Lord of Wealth, and Nara is a person, and Ayana is the resting place of people. Now you find that all over the Mahabharata. the name, that would come from that. The earliest instance of, if that's a question, Om Namo Narayanaya, I don't think it's in the Upanishads. I don't think it's in the Upanishads. I've read all the Upanishads, and it's not in the Upanishads.
Okay.
So I would say definitely the Mahabharata, which is probably the next oldest text, and the Puranas, you find it, but not in the Vedic texts. I mean, Vishnu's name is in the Brahmanas. Vishnu's name is there, in the older texts. I don't want to say Narayana's name is not there, but I can't recall. I want to say it's not in the Vedas, but I stand to be corrected if it is. But if it is, it's it might just be mentioned, but I don't think it's there. I know Vishnu is there, so therefore I don't know what the earliest instance of the name Narayana where it's to be found. But I know it's to be found in the Mahabharata, and scholars date that maybe BCE. They would say it grows over the centuries, but the original core of it would be BCE. Maybe, I don't know, they probably date it 4th, 5th century or something, in academic dating. So if that's the question, then I don't know of any text before that, but there may be. I just don't know.
But do you relate that name to Nara?
Yeah.
A man?
Yeah, Nara and Ayana, the resting places of Nara.
The resting places of men.
Well, humans, yeah, beings.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so much. Never heard that.
That's one way of thinking of God, that, God sustains and supports all beings. So he's the Ayana of Nara.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lakshman.
Sorry, Edwin.
Yeah.
It says that Narayana is mentioned in the Taittiriya.
Okay, good. So now you got a nice answer to that. It's in the. Can you find the verse? You can go just get Olivel, the Taittiriya Upanishad.
Give me a moment.
Yeah, we'll see what is exactly how it's presented. Lakshman?
Edwin.
Yeah.
You last week I had asked a question about Brahmins, whether there were genetic or guna based, and you asked me to look it up in the Upanishads. Do you remember this?
Whether the Brahmana caste?
Yeah, if whether the Upanishads say they are guna based or genetic based.
Well, there's a particular story of Satyakama that could be read both ways. So, yeah. but the Vedanta Sutra, which comes from the Upanishads, it's a commentary on the Upanishads. I think there is a discussion in the 4th chapter, which the commentators, I'm trying to remember, some commentators say you have to be a Brahman, but they're talking about knowing Brahman. But the origin of the caste system is the Purusha Sukta in the Rig Veda. I mean, that's probably the first reference to the Purusha Sukta, and it says the head is the Brahmanas, the arms are the Kshatriyas, the belly is the... So that, to my knowledge, is the first very famous reference to the caste system. But the question is, are you born into it, or is it your gunas? And there's a debate amongst, modern Hindu reformers. And I think my understanding is that the Bhagavatam does say that your caste is not determined by your birth. So there's definitely some statements that say it's not, but I would say...
And the Mahabharata says, and the Bhagavad Gita.
Well, the Gita says Chaturvarnam. It doesn't say it's not. It says the Chaturvarnam is created by me. Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma. Krishna says it's, yeah. So it does say that. But if you look at the beginning, the first chapter, the implication is a little bit more that you are. So you could go either way with that.
From Arjuna.
Yeah.
That's Arjuna speaking, not Krishna.
Okay. Fair enough. But there's certainly plenty of statements that are caste supporting. They would be in the Dharma Shastras and other genres texts. So therefore, there's a discussion, and obviously, nowadays we would take the view that it's not by caste. But, the general overriding sense is that if you're born in a family, your karma puts you there. The expectation, at least, is that would be your karma. But then
Right.
but then you could find verses then to say, well, let's say you're a Brahmana and born in a Shudra family, you can find verses to support your case that it's not. But generally speaking, that would be the expectation, and that's obvious. That's since the fourth century. I mean, even today in India, there's still that expectation. But you're right, you can find verses that undermine that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Paul.
Hi, Edwin. Yeah, I put this in the chat. It was just about the term turiya, this fourth state of consciousness, as
Yeah.
it's outlined in the Manduka Upanishad. And I was just curious. You explained it really well, but I was still trying to. I guess you really can't wrap your brain around it. That's the whole idea. But
Yeah.
what I copied in there was turiya is not another level among the three states of awareness. It is the substratum underlying them all. It is pure consciousness, the background reality that is present in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, but usually unnoticed. I was just curious if that jibed with your understanding, or you think this is a little too black and white.
No, I mean, in other words, consciousness underpins all states.
Yeah.
But the first three are consciousness pervading the mind. So therefore, in the waking state, consciousness is pervading the mind, and the mind is active, and the senses are active, and one is aware of the world. And then in dream sleep consciousness is pervading the mind, and the mind is churning up samskaras, and so there's dreams, but consciousness is pervading that. And then in the deep sleep, there's still consciousness pervading it, but there's no samskara, so there's no memory in deep sleep. So you come out of deep sleep, you don't remember anything. And then the fourth is just consciousness, conscious of consciousness. So atmanam atmane atmana. They're all states. They're not states of consciousness, because consciousness doesn't have any states. So we might say that loose. When we say that, we're speaking a bit loosely. Consciousness is just consciousness. It like the battery power of a battery. But that consciousness of the states are states of mind. So there's three states of mind. All of them have to be underpinned by consciousness. Otherwise, it's dead. There wouldn't be any action. So therefore, three of the states of consciousness are consciousness pervading the mind, and the fourth is just consciousness, conscious of consciousness.
Thank you.
So they're not technically, if we want to be really, if we want to be precise, they're not states of consciousness. Consciousness just is, and it pervades three mental states. And then turiya is just consciousness, conscious of consciousness, not pervading the mind at all. So it's a transmental state. So what is consciousness doing in the transmental state? It's just consciousness, conscious of consciousness. It has no object. So its only object is itself, if you want to think of it that way.
Okay. Great.
Rhonda.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because of you going over the terminology of Ishwara and in different situation and different traditions, and Bhagavan, and just like in India, you'll get a lot of gurus that call themselves Bhagwan. And I was just wondering how that plays into it, as well as Purusha in the mix of the Atman and Ishwara. Just a little refresher on all those terms.
So the traditions where the guru is called Bhagavan are the monistic traditions with Advaita Vedanta, right? And also Kashmir Shaivism, the Shakta traditions. Because in those traditions, in Advaita Vedanta, we are a Brahman. There is no other God. There isn't there isn't God over and above the Atman. Everything, there is just Brahman. And therefore the guru is just kind of like a medium of transmitting Brahman to the disciple, and in that sense the guru is God. But remember, in Advaita Vedanta there's no distinction between God and soul. There's no distinction between anything. It's Advaita. So but that tradition, you find, kind of rhetorically speaking, you find that the guru is sometimes called God. In the, let's say, Kashmir Shaivism, the Shakta tradition, you have the Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. Those traditions, you are Shiva. You are none different from Shiva. and therefore the guru is Shiva, and therefore the guru is God. But then when you become enlightened, you also realize you're Shiva. So in that sense, Vaishnavism doesn't accept any of that. Vaishnavism accepts an eternal distinction between God and the soul, eternal. The guru then is a servant of God, is a sevaka, is a servant God. That would be utterly taboo in Vaishnavism, as it would be in Christianity and in Islam, normative Islam, maybe not Sufi Islam, but in those traditions, the guru is not God, is the representative of God, is the servant of God, is and so forth. So the traditions where the guru is called God would be Advaita Vedanta and the Shakta traditions, and maybe and others as well. So that's that. And what was the other part? Yeah, then Bhagavan and Ishwara, we discussed that, right? The difference between that, the same thing. Ishwara, yeah, go ahead.
And Purusha.
Purusha is just a term for the Atman. It's another term for the Atman.
Okay.
And then sometimes, Krishna is called, but if you want to refer, because Krishna is also Purusha, right? Purusha just means not Prakritic. You got Purusha and Prakriti.
Mm-hmm.
Another way of thinking of it is Chit and Achit. So Prakriti is the matter, the three gunas.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are entities that are not made of the three gunas, and that's the Atman. Well, Bhagavan is also an entity not made of the three gunas. So sometimes Bhagavan is called the Parama Atman. He's also an Atman, but he's a supreme Atman. In other words, he's a conscious being. He's a being made of consciousness. But the question is, are we different or non-different from that conscious being? So those traditions which says when we get to the highest goal of the Advaita Vedanta or Kashmir Shaivism, there's no difference there isn't a higher being over and above yourself, but in different ways. In Advaita Vedanta, everything is illusory. There's just Brahman. There's no individuality. There's no God. There's no creation. In Kashmir Shaivism, there is a creation. The world is real, but nonetheless, we are all ultimately Shiva, and we have to realize that. And then the mantra is Shivoham, 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 which means I am Shiva, I am Shiva. So in those traditions, then the guru also is Shiva, but so are you ultimately. The guru has realized it, you haven't. But once you do, you become non-different from the guru, non-different from Shiva. Vaishnavism is completely different. You can never be God, because if you were God, why how the hell are you stuck in Maya? So those traditions, the guru would never ever say, you would never find a guru saying that they are God in Vaishnava traditions. They would say they're the servant of God or the representative of God. So with these kinds of questions, there's no sort of generic answers. It depends on the tradition. There's no one size fits all answers.
Thank you. Thank you
you're
so
welcome.
much. That helps. That really helps.
Okay, Peter, we'll take our last question and namaskar, Peter.
Namaskar.
You still remember Vrindavan?
Oh, very well. Think of it every day. And I've seen the term Advaita used in regards to the Chaitanya tradition.
Yeah.
Can you explain its use within that?
Absolutely. Well, we can start with Ramanuja, who calls his philosophy Vishishta Advaita. So he keeps it, because in one sense, Advaita means that everything is God. So Advaita, there is no, in Advaita Vedanta, very specifically means there's no dualisms whatsoever. So there's no Dvaitas whatsoever. By the way, my name is Advaita. You know that, yeah. So then Ramanuja comes along and he says, okay, we'll keep the word Advaita but he gives a different pitch to it, that there is Advaita, there is nothing other than God, but God there are three sort of components to God. There's God as Bhagavan and supreme controller and sustainer. There's God manifest in the world, which is kind of like a Shakti of God. And there's God manifest in the tiny little souls, which we even read in the Bhagavatam, are little sparks or unctions. So it's all God, but it's Vishishta, differentiated. There are differences between this category of non-dualism. So that's very different from the Advaita of Shankara. The Gaudiya tradition call themselves Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva. They tend to actually use the term Achintya Beda. And Beda Abeda is the same as Dvaita is Beda, difference, just a different word. So Abeda is non-difference. So they would say Beda Abeda is both difference and non-difference. So it's very similar to Ramanuja. The Vaishnavas they all have these names: Dvaita, Dvaita, Beda, Beda, Vishishta, Dvaita. But the common denominator of them all is they don't want to, other than Madhva, they want to acknowledge that in one sense everything is God, but within that category of everything being God, that Advaita or Abheda category, there are differences between God with a big G, you and I as individual souls, and the world. So therefore, Beda is the Gaudiya Vaishnava term. Or Dvaita is just exactly the same. Dualism and non-dualism. So the non-dualism is that everything is God, but the dualism is, well, within that there are eternal differences. So they don't want to say there's anything different from God, because they want to say that, on the one hand, God is everything, or at least sustains everything. So, but at the same time, they're not going to go with Shankara and say all dualisms are illusory and never existed in the first place. They're imagined superimpositions. They're not going to accept that. And so they keep Advaita or Abheda, or, they might keep that to indicate everything is God, but then they add the supplement, Beda Beda, Dvaita Dvaita, or Vishishta Dvaita, to indicate that within that oneness, that everything is God on one level, but there are differences. So the world is God, but God is, and Krishna says in the Gita, I am in everything, I am in everything is in me, but I am not in them. There's a verse I can give you, we read it the other day. So that would be that would be that. Okay, my
Very good.
friends.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
You too.
Yeah. By the way, did you finish your book, Peter? Did you finish your book?
I did. It's with a publisher now. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Did you want to? Do you need anything for for the blurb or anything like that, or a back?
I will let you know if
All right,
that
let
day
me know.
comes.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading it, Peter. Sorry,
Thank you.
I didn't mean to be presumptuous, but I'm
No.
at your service. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So, what happened?
About the Narayana.
Oh, in the Taittiriya. Okay. What does it say?
Yeah, it's the Taittiriya Aranyaka. And I have only found it in Sanskrit, so I couldn't find Narayana there. But I found a summary of it, and in the summary is named, but doesn't mean much.
Okay, but that's not the Upanishad, though. That's the Aranyaka.
No,
Okay.
exactly.
Well, if it's of interest to anybody, we can look at it. I if anyone's very interested in it, we can look at the Sanskrit and see what we think. How are you doing up there, Arti? We bachegangeya, bageya. Huh? Okay, my friends, what are we going to do now? We're going to go Jai Shri Shri Radhe Sham. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Professor.
You're welcome.